Level 1. The Volunteer. The form doesn't ask why you want this. It asks for your service number, your regiment, your physical assessment scores, and your commanding officer's signature. 4 lines of administrative information that represent the entirety of what the Special Air Service requires from you before it decides whether to invite you to destroy yourself on a Welsh mountain for 3 weeks. Your CO signs without comment. He's been in the Army 16 years. He knows what the form means. He looks at you across his desk for a moment with an expression that contains something between respect and the particular sympathy of someone who knows what's coming and isn't going to say so. You've been in the Army for 5 years, Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, 2 tours of Afghanistan, a rotation through Cyprus, a Northern Ireland attachment that was quieter than expected and instructive in ways you're still processing. You are 24 years old and physically capable at a level that your regiment's PTI describes as exceptional and that you understand as merely the floor of what this process will require. You've read everything available, which isn't much. The SAS doesn't publish its training pipeline. What you know comes from veterans who spoke obliquely at regimental bars, from books that captured the shape of it without the texture, from one conversation with a blade, the informal title for a serving SAS operator, who told you precisely nothing useful and communicated everything essential through the way he sat and the way he listened and the way he assessed you without appearing to. You drive to Hereford on a Sunday evening. Stirling Lines, the home of 22 SAS. You pass through the gates and you feel the institution before you see it, the specific gravity of a place where serious things happen seriously. The camp is unremarkable architecturally. Low buildings, functional landscaping, the kind of infrastructure that exists to support work rather than impress visitors. You report to the DS, directing staff, at 0600 the following morning. He looks at you once. He tells you where to be at 0500 tomorrow. That's all. You go find your bunk and lie on your back in the dark and run through nothing in particular. Your mind is quiet in the way it goes quiet before something large. Not blank, present, waiting without anticipation. Tomorrow starts something that will either end in 3 weeks or define the next decade. You don't know which yet. Level 2. The Selection Candidate. The Brecon Beacons in January are not a metaphor for anything. They are simply cold and wet and steep and featureless in the specific way that navigation becomes a technical problem rather than an intuitive one, and the Bergen on your back weighs 55 pounds and your boots have been wet since hour 3 of day 1 and the DS are somewhere, you don't know where, you never know where, watching something about you that you can't identify and can't perform for because you don't know what it is. That's the architecture of selection. You navigate, you cover ground, you reach checkpoints and receive the next checkpoint and cover more ground. The distances are not disclosed in advance. The time standards are not disclosed at all. You either make the checkpoint within the window or you don't, and if you don't, a DS materializes from somewhere and informs you that you are returned to unit, RTU'd, and that's the end of your attempt. The Brecon Beacons are 25 miles of moorland at altitude. You cross them repeatedly in different configurations over 3 weeks of test week and the hills before it. Your feet develop problems that you manage rather than treat, because treatment requires stopping, and stopping is the one thing that selection doesn't permit. You eat while walking, you navigate while eating, you exist in a continuous forward motion that is partly physical and partly an act of sustained will that has nothing to do with physical capability. By day 8, you've watched 43 candidates leave. Some RTU'd on time, some withdrew voluntarily, walked to a DS and said the words that end it. You watch the ones who withdraw with something that isn't judgment. You understand the withdrawal. The withdrawal is honest, an accurate assessment of personal limit. What you don't understand is why the limit is where it is for them and not where it is for you. You have no answer to that. You just keep moving. The Fan Dance is a single-day navigation event over Pen Yi Fan, the highest peak in the Beacons, that functions as both a physical test and an early filter. You complete it 47 minutes inside the standard. The DS who checks you at the finish looks at your time and writes something in his notebook and says nothing. You learn to read silence here. That particular silence meant something. Continuation training runs after test week. Jungle training in Brunei, combat survival, tactical questioning resistance, escape and evasion. You spend 3 days being hunted across the Welsh countryside by the Hunter Force before being captured and put through tactical questioning in a facility where the methods are legal and the experience is not comfortable. You don't break. Not because you're exceptional, because you've decided, in advance, at a level below reasoning, that you won't. Your SP, service number, appears on the badged list. You are in. Level 3. The Trooper. The badge is a winged dagger. Who dares wins. The regimental motto is stitched in Arabic below the blade, qui audit adipitur in the Latin version, though the Arabic came first from the regiment's North African origins in 1941 when David Sterling convinced a skeptical high command that small teams of highly trained men operating behind enemy lines could produce results disproportionate to their numbers. He was right. You are now one of the inheritors of that argument. You're assigned to D Squadron, Air Troop. The SAS has 4 Sabre squadrons, A, B, D, and G, each with 4 troops, air, boat, mobility, and mountain. Your troop specialty is free-fall parachuting, HALO and HAHO, high-altitude low opening and high-altitude high opening, the techniques that allow insertion from aircraft at altitudes where you're functionally invisible to ground observers and radar systems. You spend your first year in the regiment doing more training than operations. This surprises you. You expected immediate deployment. What you get instead is the most comprehensive technical education available in the British military. Advanced demolitions, SINT collection, HINT source handling, advanced trauma medicine, communication systems, vehicle operations, language instruction. The regiment invests in you with a depth that reflects the expectation that you will operate with significant autonomy in environments where resupply and reinforcement are not available. You deploy to an operational theater that you will not name publicly for the remainder of your military career. Your first operation is a 4-man patrol insertion by HAHO from 28,000 feet into a target area. You open at altitude, fly under canopy for 40 minutes in formation, and land within 100 meters of the designated LZ. You spend 11 days on the ground gathering intelligence on a network that interests various agencies for various reasons. You make no contact. You extract via vehicle to a border crossing arranged by people whose affiliation you're not briefed on. You debrief for 4 hours. You're in the pub by 2100. That rhythm, extreme professional intensity followed by complete normalcy, is the texture of life in the regiment. You go from operating in some of the most dangerous environments on Earth to sitting in the Hereford pub with your mates talking about football. The transition is seamless because it has to be. Carrying the operational world into the normal world would make both impossible. You learn to compartmentalize completely. Level 4. The Senior Trooper. 3 years badged, multiple operational deployments. You've been on the ground in 4 countries across 2 continents. You've conducted direct action, reconnaissance, personnel recovery, and advisory operations. You've worked alongside American Special Operations Forces, Delta, DevGru, Rangers, and you've developed a professional respect for their capability alongside a precise understanding of where British SOF doctrine diverges from American SOF doctrine and why those divergences exist and when each approach is superior. Your skill set has compounded into something that functions below conscious processing. You don't think through a patrol protocol anymore. You think through the problem and the protocol is just there, integrated, automatic, a framework that your mind operates within rather than a procedure it follows. The difference between a trained operator and an experienced one is exactly this. The trained operator has the procedures. The experienced one has absorbed the procedures until they've become instinct, and the mental bandwidth formerly occupied by procedure is now available for situational awareness and decision-making. You've been shot at seriously twice. Both times your response was correct. Both times you made decisions in fractions of seconds that the subsequent debrief confirmed were sound. Both times afterward, you sat somewhere quiet for a period of time that varied between 20 minutes and 2 hours, and something moved through you that wasn't fear. Fear was during, this was after. Something more like the sensation of the event being filed, cataloged, moved from active processing to storage. Your long-term partner doesn't know the details of what you do. She knows enough. She's a nurse, practically intelligent, emotionally precise. She doesn't ask for operational details and you don't provide them, and the agreement between you is unspoken and functional. What she does know is when you've been somewhere difficult, not from what you say, but from a quality of stillness you have when you return from certain deployments that is different from ordinary tiredness. She leaves you alone in that stillness until you come back from it. You always come back from it. You've started to wonder how long that will be true.
Level 5. The Corporal. The SAS runs flatter than any comparable unit in the world. The rank structure exists, but the hierarchy operates through competence rather than through the formalities of rank. A corporal in the regiment commands more functional authority through demonstrated capability than a major in a conventional unit commands through the crown on his shoulder. This is understood by everyone inside the wire and by virtually nobody outside it. You are a patrol commander now. Your four-man patrol is your instrument and your responsibility simultaneously. You know your men with the granular specificity of someone who has spent weeks on the ground with them under conditions that reveal everything. Who makes good decisions when tired, who gets quieter under stress in a functional way, and who gets quieter in a way that bears watching. Who can be relied upon in a contact to do exactly what's required and nothing else. You've been selected for a counter-terrorism role. The regiment's counter-terrorism capability is one of the most refined in the world, a legacy of Prince's Gate and the Iranian embassy siege in 1980, when the regiment's assault team went through the building live on BBC television and demonstrated to every government and every terrorist organization simultaneously that this was possible and what it looked like. The CT role requires a level of CQB precision that goes beyond what standard operational training produces. You spend 6 months doing nothing but close quarters work, room entry, hostage rescue, marksmanship at the standard that the CT role demands, which is the standard where you can put a round into a target that is partially obscured by a hostage at distances that require both technical excellence and the kind of cold decision-making that training can approximate but not fully replicate. You go through the motions of that decision-making in training so many times that the decision has been pre-made. When the moment comes, and it comes once, in a situation that generated very brief news coverage and no official acknowledgement, you don't decide. You execute. The hostage goes home. You debrief and go to the pub. Level 6. The Sergeant. You've been in the regiment 9 years. Staff Sergeant, which in the SAS carries the weight of someone who is the institutional backbone of a squadron, the operational experience, the training authority, the human knowledge that makes the difference between a good squadron and an exceptional one. You run a patrol training program for badged troopers rotating through continuation training requirements. You stand where the DS stood when you were the candidate grinding through the beacons, and you see yourself in some of them and don't show it. The ones who remind you of yourself at that stage are not necessarily the ones who'll be the best operators. Sometimes the ones who are least like what you were develop into something more capable than anything you could have predicted. That teaches you something about assessment that changes how you look at people. You've been selected for a liaison role with the CIA's Special Activities Division. 18 months at Langley, then forward deployments embedded with SAD ground branch elements conducting operations that exist in the space between official military action and official intelligence action. You learn the American system from the inside, its capabilities, its cultural assumptions, its institutional relationship to risk and accountability and the law of armed conflict. You contribute to 2 operations that produce outcomes that are briefly mentioned in American Senate Intelligence Committee hearings as successes without elaboration. You return to Hereford. You know things now that live permanently in the restricted compartment of your mind, not as burden, as texture, part of the complete picture of what the world actually is underneath its official surface. You are remarkably calm about this. That calmness used to require effort. Now it's just how you are. Level 7. The Warrant Officer. The Warrant Officer Class 2 in the SAS is the Squadron Sergeant Major. Every Sabre squadron has one. He is the operational heart of the squadron, the most experienced operator, the custodian of standards, the human bridge between the commissioned officers who command and the troopers and NCOs who execute. In the regiment's flat hierarchy, the SSM's actual authority exceeds his nominal rank in ways that any commanding officer who understands the institution will recognize and accommodate. You've been in for 17 years. You have a working relationship with your squadron OC, the officer commanding, a major, that is one of the most functional professional partnerships of your career. He's from the parachute regiment originally, 2 tours of Helmand before selection, smart and tactically fluent, and wise enough to know what he knows and what you know and how those two things fit together. You brief together, you plan together. In the field, his command authority is complete, and your operational knowledge is continuously available to it. The operations at this level have changed in character. You're not always the trigger puller anymore. Sometimes you are. There are operations where your experience is the specific asset required and you go in with the patrol, but more often you're the planning authority, the mission architect, the person who looks at a target package in an operational environment and a set of constraints and constructs the approach that gives your men the best probability of success and return. The difference between a plan that works and a plan that costs lives is often a question that someone with 17 years of operational experience can answer and someone with 7 cannot. You are that someone now. You've lost 4 men over your career, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in a training accident, 1 to a medical event at home 3 months after returning from a deployment. 4 men whose capability and character you knew completely, whose families you know, whose children you've watched grow up at regimental events with the specific heaviness of knowing what their fathers were and what they did, and that most of the world will never know either. You carry them the way you carry everything, without theater, without externalizing it. They're there. They'll always be there. That's appropriate. Level 8. The Regimental Sergeant Major. There is 1 Regimental Sergeant Major of 22 SAS. 1. The RSM is the senior warrant officer of the regiment, the apex of the enlisted and warrant officer structure, the human custodian of everything the regiment is and has been since Sterling stood in the desert in 1941 and convinced the high command that small, capable, autonomous teams could change the course of a campaign. You've been in 24 years. You were a trooper when the regiment operated in Bosnia, a corporal when the Iraq War started, a sergeant during the peak of the Afghanistan campaign, a warrant officer through the shift into the gray zone operations that now characterize the security environment, the space below conventional conflict where most of the world's actual violence happens and where the regiment has operated since its founding. The regiment has changed across those 24 years, and it hasn't changed at all. The technology is different, the threat picture is different, the geopolitical context shifts continuously, the doctrine evolves, but the fundamental thing, the selection of men capable of independent judgment and extreme capability and sustained performance under conditions that break most people, and the training of those men into an instrument of national will that operates where other instruments cannot, that hasn't changed since the beginning and won't change after you're gone. Your job is to make sure it doesn't change incorrectly. The RSM's mandate is institutional, cultural, generational. You are the memory of the regiment, the living connection between what it has been and what it will become. You know which traditions exist because they produce operational value and which exist because nobody thought to question them. You preserve the former and quietly retire the latter. You sit in the OC's orders alongside the commanding officer, a lieutenant colonel, not as an advisor but as an institutional counterweight. Where the OC brings command authority and strategic direction, you bring operational depth and human knowledge. The combination is the thing that makes the regiment function at its level. You stand on the clock tower square at Sterling Lines for the regimental memorial service. The names on the clock tower are the regiment's dead, every man killed on operations since the regiment's formation. You know the recent names personally. The older names you know by reputation, by story, by the way they live in the regiment's institutional memory as men whose character defined what the regiment was allowed to become. You stand there and feel the weight of what you're responsible for maintaining. Not preserving, maintaining. There's a difference. Preservation is static, maintenance is active. The regiment is a living thing that requires active care, the constant calibration of standards, the continuous development of people, the ongoing examination of what the regiment does and how it does it is still correct for the world it operates in. You do that work every day. You will do it until the day you hand the RSM's pay stick to your successor and walk out of Sterling Lines for the last time and return to being a person with one life instead of a person who is also an institution. That day is 8 months away. You're not thinking about it yet. There's too much work. There's always too much work. That's how you know it matters.